that I've seen on the internet, and I'm curious to get your take on it.
I think it's so riled up. I have no idea where this came from.
Emily, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I think it's going to be great. I am looking forward to your perspectives and your experience. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. I'm personally just very curious, so I'm really looking forward to learn more about you. But with that being said, maybe I guess my first burning question is, what got you thinking about wanting to become a registered dietitian? Was that a lifelong dream or?
Sure. So it was kind of, I don't know, a lot of dietitians have these really moving, amazing stories about something they dealt with in the past that then made them want to be a dietitian. I just always loved food. I
Nice.
would, when I was a kid, I'd always be the one reading the nutrition facts label, and I would go to the library and get different cooking books and cook my family a whole meal from different countries and stuff. I just absolutely loved food. And then when it was time to go to college, I was just looking at literally a list of majors. And when I saw nutrition on there, it just really stood out to me because it didn't feel like it fit. Everything else felt like this is a job, this is a career, and nutrition is just fun and interesting. So I was like, hey, since I can study something that I have a lot of passion for and just love, I might as well go that route. So
That's so
yeah.
cool. I
Mhm.
think it's so different because I was absolutely expecting you to tell me a tale of your time.
I
But
know.
I love that you're just simply a food nerd. I love that you went to the library and you were cooking meals for your family. I think that's so fun.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's funny because I think most people are expecting a lot of people, and the stories people have are really moving. Like
Yeah.
they had Hashimoto's or some kind of autoimmune disease that nutrition saved them. But no, I just think food's really cool and
Do you like the
decided to
science
go that route.
of it, or are you more I just love to eat food?
Ooh, a little of both. Like it started off with just a curiosity
Hmm.
of food in general, but also food from different cultures. And then once I went to school, realized how complex it is and how much we actually don't know. So there's a lot still to be learned in the world of nutrition. But yeah, it's a little bit of both, I'd have to say.
I would love for you to tell me things that I don't know about food. What are some of the big
Ooh.
common misconceptions that you find most people have,
Oh,
or something that really blew your mind?
yeah, gosh. That's a really good question. I mean, when it comes to common misconceptions, the first thing that comes to mind is all of the stuff that we talk about on our podcast. But I have a podcast with another dietitian friend called RDs versus BS. So we're talking about all sorts of different BS that's out there in the nutrition world. Usually my go-to answer to that question when people are like, what is misunderstood about food and dieting and health in general? And typically what I say is that I think there's a lot of information out there that is very polarizing. Like
Mm,
people who are vegan are telling everyone else that everyone in the world needs to be vegan or you're not going to be healthy. But
yeah,
then there's the keto people who are only eating meat and telling everyone that that is the only way to be healthy, when in reality, everyone has a different approach to food and a different diet that's going to suit them best. And no one
totally.
really talks about that. How it's vegan is healthy for some people and truly keto is healthy for some people, but both aren't healthy for everyone in the world. So it's really just about figuring out what works out best for you. And that's not a black and white answer. And I find that people prefer black and white answers because it's I can follow rules. Um, but that's just what I've learned to be true. And I've also learned that, like I mentioned earlier, the more we learn about nutrition, the more we learn that we don't actually know it all. And there's a lot still to be learned out there. Um, but something, I guess, a little more concrete that really I think is interesting that we're starting to get some new research around is the whole like gut brain connection.
Yeah.
Like if we have a healthy stomach and healthy intestines, then that can actually lead to higher serotonin levels and a better mood, among a whole host of other things. And we've barely scratched the surface of looking into that. So, yeah, that was
It's so
answering your
fascinating.
question in a ton of different ways, but I could go on and on. But
I think
yeah, that's what I would wrap it up as.
it's so fascinating. I think literally everything that you've said, I'm just listening so intently because I think what I personally come from the camp of like I love to eat. I love to go out to a restaurant. And I just find it so interesting how different all of us are because I live a relatively like active lifestyle. I work out 4 days a week, I try to stay as active as I possibly can. And as a result, I can kind of eat whatever I want. Like I do lean, I feel like I've also tried so many different varieties of like quote unquote diets. Like I've tried keto, I've tried like high protein, I've tried like all kind I've been vegan before, like I've tried it all. And something my previous trainer talked to me about was which is what I loved about her. She was like, we're just gonna try everything and see what works best for your body. So like for me, I found like low carb works better for me, like low processed carbs. I should be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
That works for me. So like I do that during the weekdays, but on the weekends, like I love pasta. I love to go out and have a sourdough bread. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's, and I feel like as a result, I've never really had any like true gut issues. I mean, I am sensitive to certain things. I have like allergies to chemicals, but other than that, like I find that I have a pretty easy time with food. Whereas I talk to some of my other friends who maybe don't live quite as healthy or like an active lifestyle, I should say, like they struggle being able to maintain or balance their weight in an easier time than like I would, for example. And I've always thought that that
Mm-hmm.
was really interesting because I think people's first thought is like, a diet and like physical appearance and weight like go hand in hand, which I think is also sort of like a tough way to go into it mindset
Mm-hmm.
wise. And then also it's a lot about like what can your body tolerate and how does that work best.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I wish everyone thought the way that your trainer spoke to you about it, I think is perfect. Like, let's try everything and see what sticks.
Yeah.
I wish everyone had that opportunity instead of just kind of getting caught up. I guess in a way, the diet cycle is trying a bunch of things and seeing what sticks, but it's trying things that aren't really meant to last. Whereas the way that you approached it was let's just try these overall like lifestyle ways of approaching eating and see how I feel best. And choose something that is sustainable. I think that's the most important piece.
That was what I learned. And she was great also because she came from the perspective as a personal trainer. She was like, I hope to get to the point where eventually you don't need me and you're able to work out
Mm-hmm.
and do all these things by yourself. So, like, I've
Mm-hmm.
taught you the form, I've instilled a sense of discipline in you, you're aware of how to handle your food. And then you're able to like do all these things on your own. And so
Yeah.
all of it from the beginning was about creating a sustainable lifestyle. And I think that's also partially because as a result of so much trial and error throughout my life, I was always just sort of looking for something more sustainable. And ironically for
Mm-hmm.
me, that happened during the pandemic because I had 2 years of basically just like no vacation. So I was working out more consistently than I ever had in my entire life. And
Mm-hmm.
through that experience, I was able to learn to love exercise and like develop a different relationship that I had with it in the past. Because I think for me in the past, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but it was a lot about like vanity. It was like, I have
Yeah.
to look good. And I talk to people nowadays and they're like, oh, how do you stay so active? And I was like, it gives me the serotonin. It's how I
Mm-hmm.
reset. It's like, I just sometimes you find you're like having a bad day and you're like, am I having a bad day or do I just need to go to the gym?
Sure.
So for your story then, sorry, I kind of derailed us slightly.
All good.
I am also curious to know how you opened your own practice. I think that's so amazing because clearly you're so young, and I feel like anybody who opens their own practice should be like, I don't know why older. I just
So
You know what I mean? Is that
definitely. No, in my mind, I wasn't planning on doing this until I'd kind of given myself the rule like 10 years of experience as a dietitian. Then I'll be ready to open a private practice. But about 5 years in to be, working as a dietitian, at the time I was at University of Illinois. I was a sports dietitian, so I was working mostly with the basketball team. My now husband was working with the football team, and it was 2020, and he accepted a job at Stanford to work with their football team. He's also a dietitian.
oh cool.
Um, so we packed up and drove across the country. I quit my job, and then it was, April of 2020 and COVID and California, and everything shut down. So nobody's hiring a sports dietitian at that time. So I really just looked at it as an opportunity of, well, I might as well try opening a private practice now and let's see what happens.
Yeah,
And luckily, I was able to put a lot of time into it, just like with you and working out. That was like me and my private practice. Like, I have nothing else going on. I'm not going anywhere. So
literally.
I'll try it out and see how it goes. And so, yeah, I think a big lesson from that was just I had originally told myself that, 5 years in is not enough time for me to
Mm.
start my own private practice, but it was. And I figured it out, and I'm so glad I did because that was the ultimate goal. It wasn't
Yeah.
always to work for someone else. And, while there's a lot of benefits of having a salary and all of that, the goal was always to start a private practice. So I'm glad I started when I did. Um, had to learn a lot. I'm still learning a lot, but yeah, COVID just kind of pushed me towards that decision earlier than I originally would have.
I really related to something that you said about like you couldn't work for somebody else forever because I
Yeah.
think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and it's like I feel that way so often where I'm like I can't imagine spending the rest of my life dedicating my time and energy into someone else's vision. And
Mhm.
to hear you say that, I'm just like, ah, yes, the common thread between entrepreneurs. But I'm also wondering if you went into it wanting to do something really different with your practice. Like, had you, because I'm sure you worked with other dietitians before, and
Mhm.
I'm curious to know if maybe you had like a different method or a different mission behind why you wanted to start your own practice.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, when I went into it, pretty much my only experience in my career was being a sports dietitian, like working with collegiate athletes. And yeah, I just kind of decided that, while I like working with athletes and I still work with some high school athletes mostly, I was really interested in just helping the general population because I saw
Mm.
so much need there. And another thing I noticed was that a lot of times, and this is just when we go to school to be dietitians, we're really taught about the metabolism and nutrition. Like we are for sure nutrition experts, but we're really not experts in communicating with clients, in helping clients get motivation and get excited about nutrition. It's really just write a meal plan, give it to the client. There you go. So when I went into my private practice, I wanted it to be both. I wanted it to be, yes, I'm a nutrition expert and here is the information, but I also wanted to support people along the way, and get beyond just here is the knowledge. I call it like taking it from the knowing to the doing. And that is something we were not taught. So I very quickly learned in my private practice as I was taking clients that I was just giving them the knowing, not the doing. And so to kind of bridge that gap, I decided to take a life coaching course. And
Gosh.
I'm so glad I did. I wouldn't call myself a life coach, but I have really taken a lot of those things that I've learned in that course and have incorporated it with my nutrition clients because it is just a hugely important piece that we're not taught anything about in school. But what good is your meal plan if you can't help clients actually incorporate it and make it last?
Totally. I think a lot of what people struggle with the most regarding like nutrition and, if somebody says like, oh, 2024 is the year that I get healthy, it's like, but in
Mhm.
order to actually follow through with that, there's a lot of mindset work that goes behind the scenes that requires
Mhm.
some work as well. And hearing you say this, I find it so interesting because we opened the conversation with like, how cool is the gut and the mind connection? And like, you kind of do
Mhm.
that with your private practice. Like, you help
Sure.
people address like what they're putting into their bodies, but you're also helping them bridge that connection between mind and stomach almost.
That's a really good observation. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, I just think it's so important. You can't be healthy without both.
Totally.
And yeah, that was partially why I got into sports nutrition because I believed that you couldn't be healthy without exercise and nutrition, which is true. But now, since starting my private practice, I still believe that. And I've added in the piece of, okay, all the knowledge in the world isn't going to help you if you don't have support in putting it into practice. So I think it's all very important and intertwined.
I'm fascinated to learn what it was like learning to become a life coach. Like what were the things that they taught you like to be motivating? Because I think a lot of I'm I'm just gonna let you say it and then I'll see if what I think is turns out.
Okay. Yes. So if you would have asked me like 5 years ago what I thought of life coaching, honestly, I would have just thought, it's a scam, like it's a 1 day thing, and kind of, I don't know, kind of how I feel about the general term nutritionist. Like
Mm,
you can go to one class and call yourself a
mm,
nutritionist where like dietitian requires all of this stuff. But then I had an experience with my business coach I hired was also a life coach.
mm,
And just the way that she would go about sessions and just go about connecting and helping me put things into my business and make it happen. She really just inspired me to at least check out this one course that she not only took herself, but now taught. And so, yeah, I went, there's so many life coaching certifications out there, but the one I went through is called Life Purpose Institute in San Diego, but I went and did it virtually. And it was really fascinating. Like it was quick. It was, I think 1 week, but every day you're there for like 8 to 10 hours.
oh wow.
Um, but yeah, gosh, they just really help you learn things and then put it into practice. And, specific things that come to mind that I use in my client sessions today is helping people when they discover that there's a roadblock, helping them figure out how to get past that.
Mm,
Because in nutrition, everyone's going to experience a roadblock or they wouldn't be working with me. Like
true.
that they have run up and they know for the most part, like this is what it means to be healthy, but I can't get over this. So specific coaching techniques to help people recognize what it is and just figure out how to get through it, how to get over it, how to tear the roadblock down and push forward. Um, yeah, there were also, specific ways to go about motivating and questions and like different things that we could do to just help a client who is not feeling motivated, maybe dig a little deeper and figure out, what is my motivation?
Mm,
Um, yeah. And the biggest takeaway from the whole life coaching school was that you as the coach or as the dietitian don't always have all the answers, and trusting that the client can come up with answers for themselves, and that is a lot of times going to be a lot more powerful than if I just told them, well, I think this week you should focus on hydration. Like, okay, I'm sure they respect my opinion, but if a client kind of takes ownership and says, I'm realizing that this is a piece of my life that I really want to work on. And this week it's going to be eating more protein. They just have some more buy in. So,
yeah,
not being, as the dietitian, not being the director of everything, like I'm here to guide and give my
totally.
recommendation, but putting a lot of it in the hands of the client and asking questions that help them think of the things that they want to do, they want to work on, kind of guiding that conversation.
It's fascinating. When you first told me what it was going to be like, I imagined that it was incredibly helpful experience also from a CEO perspective, because I think I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but so much of entrepreneurialism is about mindset and learning to overcome your roadblocks. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also about being able to drive the vision and motivate your team towards your certain goals. And also, not even just like from a mental perspective as an entrepreneur, you're going to run into physical roadblocks all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having almost like a passive observer mindset on your experience and having the tools that not only help other people overcome their roadblocks and like, thinking about it from a life coach perspective, but taking that and applying it to your experience as a CEO and as an entrepreneur, I feel like would be also incredibly useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely was. I liked what you said about the idea of being a passive observer. I find that that is so important for myself and for a lot of my clients when they really feel, well, I can speak from my own experience. When I feel really wrapped up in a problem and I don't see any way out, just having one other person who knows the story and can kind of see it from two steps away can
Yes.
just really help you navigate these things in ways that are simple and help you achieve what you want to achieve, but just felt impossible when you're doing it on your own. So that's what I try to bring to sessions. It's like, this probably feels insurmountable, or you wouldn't be working with me right now, but let's get creative with this and have a person who, I have a clear mindset of like where you are and where you want to go. And let's just like build that road together.
Yeah, and I'm I'm sure that you experience, I don't know, actually maybe that's probably not true, but I'm curious to know if while you were in the process of building your business, if like if there were times from your experience where you were utilizing the skills that you learned to sort of like that you almost like apply the same tools that you use on your clients that you also had to like apply on yourself while you're building this
Mm-hmm.
business, because I'm sure, I don't know, like most entrepreneurs, myself included, have experienced some sort of, I mean, for me, it's never been like a major situation, but at least like there were some times when it was hard and I like had to persevere. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh gosh, 100%. I mean, it's been 4 years now, but I'm still, it's not easy.
Yeah.
I don't foresee it ever being easy, but yeah, a lot to be learned along the way. And I have found, at least in the very beginning for me, um, having a coach, learning from her, and then just like you said, applying the things I've learned to my own approach in my business is so helpful, just to not get like wrapped up in the minor details and to be able to, it's sometimes hard to do it with myself, but I try to like take a step back and imagine I'm someone else looking at my business,
Yes.
not just getting worked up in the day to day of the business, but like taking a step back and working on the business as a whole, making things more efficient, making things better, I think is such an important piece
Totally.
of owning your own business.
For a private practice to open, do you have a lot of restrictions or other regulations that, like for me, for example, opening an LLC is like actually quite simple. And I don't know if a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
know that it's like super easy to just have an LLC because it sounds like
Uh-huh.
it's something that should be hard, but it's not. But to open your private practice, do you have all like other regulations that you have to go through in order to form your business?
Luckily, no. I don't know, luckily or not luckily. It's not super complicated. At least, for a dietitian starting a private practice, it's really just the LLC. And like you said, it's not that complicated. It's really just a Google search and filling out some
Yeah.
forms. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It depends
Interesting.
if you're in a state where it requires, some states require licensure, which again is just more paperwork. California is not one of those states. So yeah, to practice as a dietitian, I mean, I have to upkeep my registered dietitian credential, and that's CEUs every few years and things like that. But yeah, starting a private practice, on paper is super easy, not too much, red tape to get through.
Interesting. That's great
Hmm.
because there's a lot of
Yeah.
freedom there for you to be able to do so.
Hmm.
And for anybody else who's listening that's ever wanted to do so, it's actually quite
Yeah,
not as challenging of a process as one might think. Do you do
for
all of your
sure.
sessions virtually?
Yes. So I have seen a few clients in person, but less than five in 4 years, like less than five sessions with clients in person. So I try to keep it virtual because it's just simple. I can see people from anywhere, but I do sometimes miss the in-person interaction. So every once in a while, if I have a client who's, within 20 to 30 minutes of me, we'll meet up somewhere. But just for logistics, we try to keep it virtual.
Totally. I think one of the reasons that so many people are drawn to entrepreneurialism is the freedom that comes with that, you know,
Yeah.
financially, monetary, or time wise. Like there's so much
Mhm.
freedom that comes with that. And so I was curious to know because I think so much of what you do is so personal to other people and you really are getting to know people. And like, I'm sure you've had some therapist-esque experiences when you're talking to people about why they can't seem to be motivated enough to get healthy on their own and like why they're coming to seek your help to help them figure that out. I'm sure it's like can sometimes be emotional. So I was asking because I was like, I wonder if it's easier to be in person for those kinds of experiences or if virtually you achieve the
Mhm.
same results.
Great question. So it does get emotional sometimes, but I really try to respect what dietitians do and what therapists do and stay in my lane. And if it gets to a point where trauma is brought up or anything where it's like it's more of the emotional than what I am comfortable helping someone with, then I will always refer to a therapist.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but overall, I definitely do think it's much easier to connect with a person if they are there in person.
Yeah.
But I don't think it takes away too much from the experience having it virtual. I think people are a lot more comfortable with virtual. They can be in their own space. People are definitely more comfortable than they were like 5 years ago before COVID made so many people learn about Zoom and learn like how to use it. Um, but yeah, even my virtual sessions, like they can get emotional. There are tears, probably one in every four sessions. There are some tears. Like it's very close to people's hearts and
Yeah.
emotions. And sometimes they'll say, I've never talked to anyone about food before, how it makes me feel. So it comes up, but yeah, I really try to stay in my lane and respect my scope as a dietitian and the scope of therapists and not swerve out of my lane too much.
That makes sense. I also
Mhm.
want to know what does like a day in the life look like for you in terms of food? Like a regular day in the life.
Like what I eat?
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Good question. It's funny. People don't ask me that much.
Really?
But I love talking. Yeah, they do. It's funny. You would expect them to.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because I'm like, you know what's up, so I want to know what you're doing at your house.
Sure. So I'm a very balanced mindset person. I don't cut anything out, but I do like to eat healthy just because I feel better when I do. So, um, yeah, I'll start the day off with breakfast. I'm a breakfast person, usually definitely some form of protein, yogurt, eggs, and then some kind of carbs. So toast or cereal, fruit, whatever. I'll try to pair the two. I can usually make it to lunch without a snack. So, because if I eat enough protein at breakfast, I feel full. So then
Time do you start?
lunch is, oh, what time?
Yeah.
Usually like an hour after I wake up. So anywhere between like 7:30 and 9.
Okay.
I'll have breakfast and sometimes coffee, sometimes not. I have nothing against it. I just, I drink it if I feel like I need a little energy boost. But yeah, for lunch, it'll be again, I just try to follow the guidelines of like vegetable, carb, and protein. So if I
Mhm.
have leftovers that are that, great. Sometimes it'll just be one of those like half of the bag salads, and then I'll find some random protein like some yogurt and cheese and then some random carb like an apple or some like dried fruit or something, and I'll just throw things together and just have some random meal that doesn't really go together, but as
Yeah.
long as it has a veggie, protein, and carb, I'm good. I'll usually have some kind of protein snack in the afternoon. So that could be anything from like, I really like edamame, like the shelled
Mm,
edamame. If it's frozen, you could just microwave it, add some salt. That has a bunch of protein in it. If I haven't had yogurt yet that day, I'll have yogurt. I probably have a Greek yogurt every single day. Um, what else? Sometimes a protein shake, like really just whatever I can get my hands on. And
yeah.
then dinner is again like a balanced veggie, protein, carb. I typically cook. I like to cook, so
Yeah.
I'll make it that. And then sometimes dessert, sometimes not. Just depends on the day, depends on what I'm feeling. But I really try to not cut anything out because when I do that, I just find that I want it 10 times more.
Totally.
So yeah.
I
All
agree.
fruits fit.
So
Yeah.
when you do this balance between like protein, vegetable, and carb, could you
Mhm.
be more specific about what that looks like?
Sure. Oh, yeah. I can get very specific. I have a whole, I wish I could like pull it up right now. I have a whole like visual that I'll share with clients.
Oh, great.
So, for most meals, and this, the recommendation is different based on a person's goals. For me, I'm just trying to maintain weight. I'm trying to just get all the nutrients I need in a day. So I'll send clients this picture of a plate, and half of it is vegetables, a quarter is carb, and a quarter is protein. So
Okay.
I try to follow that recommendation. Um, it's best if the carb is a whole grain, and it's best if the protein is a lean protein, like chicken, fish, tofu, something like that, as opposed to like a ribeye steak, right? Like lean protein is going to be most of the time the better option. Um, so yeah, I just try to make my plate look like that, knowing that if it's that random, like I'm throwing together a bunch of stuff, it's not going to fit on a plate like that. So then I'll
Right.
just do like two fistful of veggies, one fist size of
Mhm.
carb, and like a palm size of protein, and
Yeah.
make it kind of fit that as close as possible.
I also didn't know that apples were carbs. Like,
Yeah, technically, yes. So carbs are the things you expect, bread and potatoes and pasta, rice, quinoa, all that stuff. Um, but fruit also has carbs in it, and dairy also has some carbs in it, but that's something in the middle. And same with beans. Beans is like protein and carbs.
okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a really easy, like if I'm just having a salad, I know I'm gonna need more carbs just because
Right.
my body specifically like runs pretty well on carbs. And if it's lunch, I've got to get through to dinner and have energy. So it's easier than like heating up a pot and cooking some rice. Like
Totally.
I could just grab an apple or two pieces of fruit, and that's like my carb for lunch.
Yeah. That's so. And then, on the weekends, you like go out to lunch or dinner. Are
Mhm.
there anything that you stay away from when you go out to eat?
Long story short, no. Like I really do. Like I'm open to anything. Like they're the only food I say, like the only thing that I try to avoid as much as possible is trans fat, which is like not even really found in a lot of foods anymore. It's been banned, but it's sometimes in some like fried food and super processed food and like some pastries and stuff, but it'll say on the nutrition facts label. But that's really the only like food component that has no place in the diet. Like it brings your good cholesterol down and makes your bad cholesterol higher. So like we don't want that. But yeah, like I'll really eat anything, but I really do pay attention to portion size and like how I feel. So like yes, I will go eat fried chicken from Chick-fil-A, but I know that if I have too much, I'm not going to feel good. So I
Oh,
really like try to slow it down and just like eat slowly and enjoy it and like still pair it with a salad if possible and still like try to find that balance. But yeah, there's no food that I would say like I'm never gonna touch that really. Because I really think like if we're able to focus on amounts that all foods can fit, as long as we balance it out with more of the good stuff.
Yeah, I think there's also been so much like information surfacing around the internet around processed foods and I'm also intrigued to talk about the trans fat stuff because I wonder if that's leaning kind of in the same direction. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know like seed oil has been a big one that I've seen on the internet and I'm curious to
Mm-hmm.
get your take on it. Is it what do you think about it?
Oh, I could get so riled up. I have no idea where this came from, where the idea that seed oils are bad for you came from, because as dietitians, we go to the research, and the research overwhelmingly shows that there's nothing wrong with seed oils and that actually replacing saturated fat with plant oils, it's actually better for you. So I guess that's not fully true. I do kind of see where it comes from. There's a whole art, and I'm not going to get too sciencey here, but there's a whole argument of like omega 6 versus omega 3s and how omega 3s are better for you and all of this. But this seed oil thing has just been so blown out of proportion. Um, yeah, they are definitely not as bad for you as people would have you see. Like people are really anti seed oil these days.
Yeah.
I'll just say like the research doesn't quite back that up. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
that would
That's helpful to know.
something that a lot of people ask me about these days.
Yeah, because it's like it's everywhere. And I
Hmm.
remember growing up, like my mom cooked with butter or she cooked with olive oil, depending on what meal we were having. And like we had olive oil all the time. And I think there was like a conspiracy floating around the internet about how like they've been saying that 100% extra virgin olive oil, like it can be labeled as such, but it might not actually be. But I think it's all
Hmm.
checking the ingredients and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
personally have never had like any sort of gut issues with any sort of like, you know, seed oils. I think particularly like extra virgin olive oil for me is fine, but I think
Hmm.
I've heard like when you get into the more like processed versions, like stuff they use in fast food, I think that is where it tends to get trickier. But again, I'm not 100% familiar, so I
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, seed oil by itself, no, like it hasn't been shown to be inflammatory or anything like that. But you bring up fast food. Yeah, if you deep fry a breaded piece of chicken in a seed oil, it does become inflammatory. Like deep frying anything, yes, that is
Mhm.
pro-inflammatory. Um, honestly, no matter what kind of oil you use.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where people have like taken it and they're saying like, well, if this is true, then maybe eating any seed oil is bad for you. But I
Hmm.
don't think you can go wrong with if it's, extra virgin olive oil. That is 100% like, yes, eat more of that. That's very healthy. Mediterranean diet, anti-inflammation, all of that. So you
Yeah.
can't go wrong with that.
I think it's so refreshing to talk to somebody who has such a more like down to earth and sustainable way of talking about and thinking about food because I know just nowadays there's so many people talking about the subject and to
Mhm.
your point earlier like everyone is telling you to do something different and they're all saying that you have to do this one thing in order to achieve whatever results you're looking for and I think we've lost some of the like everything in moderation vibe
Mhm.
and it's just nice.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, yeah, everything in moderation doesn't sell books or get you followers. Like, it's like a very bland statement, but it's true. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest in nutrition out there, and people do like to be told black and white whether something is good and bad, but we've just, it's just not true.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, I really try to just simplify things as much as possible. I think a lot of people tend to complicate nutrition and demonize all sorts of different foods, where in reality, one food isn't going to be like your downfall unless you're allergic to it or unless you are sensitive to it. Yeah, then I would say like do not eat that. But
Yeah, probably not.
it's not gonna be, yeah, people just complicate things. And I like to make it more simple and like look at a person as a whole and say, how can we work with what you're already eating, what you like, what you don't like to eat, your environment, all of these things, and just make it as simple as possible for you to be healthy. Because then it lasts, whereas a diet is never gonna last.
Totally. What does like your weekly grocery list look like?
Ooh, good question. So I'm pretty like I try to stick to my list, so I'm pretty organized in that like I'll plan out all my dinners
Oh,
and
nice.
then figure out what I need to buy. But yeah, some things that I'll always get is those bagged salads where it has the toppings and the, dressing and all of that in there. I'll always try to have some of that. I'm always getting Greek yogurt. I'm a big fan of like cheese sticks. So I eat a lot of dairy. I'm from Ohio. I live in California now, but like I'm from Ohio. And there's a lot of dairy in our life. So I've continued that. Um, Always try to get some like lean protein, ground turkey, some chicken, stock up on stuff like rice and potatoes and things that, make a full meal. But I do, I'm not 100% like everything is healthy and fresh and not processed. Like we'll buy some quick and easy, like frozen things sometimes, like pre-cooked chicken that you can just like
Heat
air
up.
fry.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, like I buy that. I buy some convenience things because I can't spend like an hour cooking every single night. But
Yeah, of course.
yeah, I try to have a good mix of healthy things and then things that I also, when I know I don't want to be 100% healthy, that are still have redeeming qualities to them, but maybe aren't like totally made from scratch.
Yeah, my kryptonite is like I can be so good during the day, but after dinner, I just my meal is not complete without like a little something sweet afterwards.
Sure.
And that's
Yeah, I feel
just like
that.
it's my kryptonite. I can't shake it. I A while back, my friends and I, during COVID, we did this like reset because I was in China for the lockdown. So like we were in a place where we were still going.
Oh,
Yeah, wild. But
oh my
we were
gosh.
like we were going out all the time, and I think it was like right after the holidays, and we were just like feeling gross because we had just done nothing but like drink and eat our weight in delicious food.
Sure.
And we were like, we want to do a reset. So we did this like full month of like no sugar, no carbs, like processed carbs, and
Hmm.
no processed sugar, no processed carbs. We could have like some fruit. We had a very strict list of what we were doing, and it was just supposed to be like a challenge and a reset to our systems.
Hmm.
And when we finished it, like my good friend who did it with me, he had a sweet tooth his whole life, like an insatiable one. And this literally just like cured it for him. Like now he doesn't have that
Yeah.
anymore. And like did not happen for me. That just I did not have the same experience. I still have it.
Yep. Well, that's the perfect like example for different nutrition approaches. People respond to them differently.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
a really common one, that post dinner, like something sweet. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because there's plenty of like small sweet things you can have that just, crush the
no.
craving, but you also get to enjoy them, and that's totally fine.
Yeah,
Like,
if I'm when I
no
think about it, like
worries.
a good night for me is like a bowl of cherries with like a little piece of like dark chocolate.
Yes,
I
it doesn't get better than that. That's
It's
great.
delicious. My recent
Mm.
obsession are these things in the frozen food aisle called True Fruit, and they're like
Yeah.
white chocolate and milk chocolate or dark chocolate covered. They do strawberries, raspberries are my personal favorite, and those guys
Hmm.
I think are a problem for me because they feel healthy, but I always conveniently forget about the white chocolate portion of it, and I'm just like half a bag. It's not a problem.
It's like the perfect example of balance, right? It's you've
Yeah.
got your chocolate and you've got your fruit. But yeah, I could imagine. I mean, that sounds delicious. I could easily overeat those, I'm sure, if I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
I think self-discipline is probably one of the what I would consider to be like the most desirable trait in another person. I think
Mm,
somebody who has really good self-discipline and not sort of abusing it in a way where they're like unhappy individuals, but they just simply like have a good command over their desires is something that I am striving towards consistently. And it's something that I highly respect in others because I think it says a lot about you as a person.
yeah. And that, gosh, I recently read a book where they talked about discipline and how, like, ideally, we get to a place where you don't even need it doesn't like you wouldn't even call it
Yeah.
discipline. It's just like this is what I do and I don't have to force myself one way or the other. Like the things I do naturally line up with what my goals are, and so I don't need to use discipline because long term, like discipline from what the I wish I remember what the book was, but they were talking about how it's not a sustainable thing. Like people
Yeah.
in general are not good at being disciplined for a long time, and that's another reason why diets don't typically work
Hmm.
for the long term. But getting to that place where it's like this is just what I do, and I don't even have to like talk myself out of something is ideal. Like that's where we all want to be one
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
interesting because discipline is hard. And
Mhm.
I think the best experience that like I could sort of give as an example is working out for me consistently was very difficult. And it wasn't until I
Mhm.
literally just had like 2 years where I wasn't going on vacation. I didn't move, like I wasn't starting anything new really. And so there was just literally no excuse for me not to go. And also because I had a personal trainer, I had that accountability partner. It was just sort of like the perfect storm, I think, for me in terms of building that habit. And I guess maybe this is what happens is you have discipline and then discipline becomes a habit and then habits become lifestyle. And
Mhm.
that is sort of the transition. So you're no longer like fighting yourself to do the things that you know you should be doing. Instead, it just slowly becomes adapted into your everyday life and it's just now become like a personality trait almost as opposed to like a conscientious effort that you're making.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think you summarized it perfectly. So yeah, it's helping people do that and realize that you don't, because yeah, like you said, like discipline is hard. So that isn't going to be the rest of your life. Like ideally, it's a short period of time, and then you like how you feel and like the choices you're making. So you just want to do more of that.
What are some of your like top given advice that you give to your clients in terms of sort of writing or like course correcting when they're at the point where they're like, I know I need
Mm.
to make a change, but I don't know how to consistently implement them into my life?
Mm. Yeah, so this would depend. I would go two opposite ways depending on the person. Um, a lot of people who I talk to get super overwhelmed with like doing too much at once. So if they're at a place where they know they want to get healthier, they want to make habit changes, but they've tried all the diets and everyone has just been too overwhelming with them, I will do like truly focusing on one or two things at a time, and that's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So, really focusing on those, building up the habits. When those one or two things are a habit, then we add on another thing and build it up like that. Um, Other people respond much better to here is a plan that is like written for you and has your options for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, like healthy desserts, all of this so that they feel like, okay, I can just like follow this and know that it's written for my body and for my goals. So for those people, it's more of like a nutrition plan approach, which is like totally opposite because it's making all of these changes at once. So that's why I always like to get to know people before we get into making any changes because
Mhm.
half of them are going to be the slow and steady habit approach and the other half are going to be like no, I want you to overhaul and just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So that's always the first step, is just like a conversation where we don't even really talk about nutrition. I want to talk about like who you are and what you've tried in the past and where you want to go, and just kind of get a sense of a person before diving right into this is how we're going to go about it. Because again, different approaches work for different
Right.
people.
Right. It's about sort of like understanding how your mind works and then creating a plan that
Hmm.
allows you to sustain that.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to close. I love a good actionable takeaway. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on.